The U.S. Constitution. It's the supreme law of the land. From it spring our hopes, dreams, and the very promise of democracy. Most people would agree that it's been a great friend to every American. But was it always so? To find out more, I sat down with a very special guest, the American Constitution himself. Mr. Constitution, sir, good afternoon. How are you? I'm doing very well, Mr. Helminski, thank you. You've lived such a remarkable life. Tell me, what was it like for you growing up with the U.S. all those years? It's been a wonderful adventure, really, Mr. Helminski. I've been lucky to be part of some important moments in America's history. Indeed you have. You've changed a lot, haven't you? That's right. How many times is it now? Well, 27 to be exact. Give or take a few revisions. They call those the amendments. Ah, I see. What was your favorite amendment? Well, definitely the first. Do you know that one? That's my favorite for sure. It gives everyone the right of free speech. You know, to say what you like, be skeptical, follow any religion you'd like, or no religion at all. Have you ever felt worried about your future? Definitely. When was that? During the Jim Crow era, I was very much afraid about what would happen to me, and all of America for that matter. Tell us what was going on. You see, the Civil War had ended sometime earlier, and the Congress decided to pass some amendments. Remember those? The 13th Amendment, you know that one? Let me see. That's the one that ended slavery, right? You got it. Good job, Mr. Helminski. That wasn't the only amendment, though. You see, it was Reconstruction time. And the government was trying to rebuild the South and rebuild the lives of the former slaves. It was more than that, though, much bigger. The 3 amendments were about not only helping the former slaves, but making it so that terrible things that had happened to slaves would never happen again to anyone, you know? So the amendments were about protecting everyone's rights. You said there were other amendments during Reconstruction, not just the 13th, right? Oh, right. There was the 14th, and there was the 15th Amendment, too. Do you know those? Do you know the 14th Amendment? Let me see. That's the one that gives voting rights to all men, correct? No, a lot of people get that one wrong. Nice try, though, Mr. Helminski. You're thinking of the 15th Amendment. The 14th Amendment protects everyone from discrimination. You know, unfair treatment. What made you so concerned during the Jim Crow time? Some people just hadn't learned the lessons from the Civil War, you see. Mostly that was in the South. Don't get me wrong, I love the South, just like I love all my fellow Americans. The people down there have so many great traditions, great food, warmth, enchanting music, hospitality. For a time, though, you know, the Jim Crow time, people were stuck in some bad ways. What do you mean? Well, the state governments were standing in the way of all the amendments Congress put in me. For example, they created segregation laws that split places up. It was quite unfair. The black folks were given separate places that were almost always worse than those given to white folks. Sometimes places like campgrounds, pools, libraries, even schools simply weren't available to the black folks. Are you saying this stood in the way of the amendments you were talking about? Exactly. Segregation laws went against the 14th Amendment, is that right? Very good. That wasn't the only problem, though. African Americans had no way to improve the laws or protect themselves from the Jim Crow problems. What do you mean? You see, state leaders also stood in the way of their voting, you know, having their voices heard. The states created truly unfair literacy tests, sometimes with impossible questions, and expensive poll taxes that made some people have to decide between food on the table and having their voices heard through voting. And that wasn't all. Sometimes sheriffs and election officials just scared African Americans away from voting with threats and violence. I see. You're saying that they stood in the way of the 15th Amendment. You got it. You're pretty good at this. Thank you. Now, the problems you're describing, they were all quite a long time ago, right? Yes, they happened long ago, but not that long ago, really, if you've lived as long as I have. What finally solved the problem for you? Well, the work is never finished, you see. That's how democracy is. I can only do my work, as the Constitution, if Congress and normal people like you are willing to follow my suggestions and give me support. I'll watch out for you, if you guys watch out for me. But even if the work is ongoing, never ending, I still got a huge leg up back in the 1960s. What do you mean? What happened in the 1960s? Oh, the Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act, of course. They gave the federal government tools to defend me better and to finally defeat the old Jim Crow laws and voting obstacles. You mean the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965? Yeah, that's right. Good job. The Voting Rights Act helped me out big time. It made all the old Jim Crow states have to get their elections checked out by the federal government, to make sure they were fair. Federal government, that means national government, right? Right. It was very effective, this new law. And then the Civil Rights Act made segregation laws illegal, of course. The time was right for a big change like that, The Supreme Court, my old friends down there in the Capitol, yeah. Anyway, the Supreme Court had thrown out the old Plessy versus Ferguson decision, which had made Jim Crow laws legal. That was in 1954, I think it was. The Brown versus Board of decision, yeah. That threw out or overturned the Plessy decision. Wonderful moment. It makes me a little misty when I think about it. All 9 justices agreed that separate was not equal and never could be. Powerful indeed. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to talk with us today, Mr. Constitution. The pleasure was all mine, Mr. Helminski. Say, do you have any big plans for the future? Well, after this big 3rd grade civil rights multiple choice test and humanities class, I'm taking a much needed vacation.